Hey guys, it's Katie from Philly Wellness Center, and we're talking about cholesterol today because there's a lot of misconceptions out there about cholesterol and what you need to know. So, this is going to be a multi-part series. We're not going to get through everything you need to know on cholesterol today, but I do want to set the stage for what you need to know and why what you currently know is not not the ideal situation. So let's talk about cholesterol. So cholesterol is actually one of the most important substances in your body. It is so important that the body does not depend on you to provide dietary sources for it, because every single cell in your body requires cholesterol. It's called the phospholipid bilayer. And that phospholipid bilayer is made up of cholesterol and as well as plasmalogens. And we'll get into plasmalogens in another lecture and another time, but just know in the brain, plasmalogens make up 30% of that phospholipid bilayer, and in the heart, they make up 50%. So keep that in mind. They're extremely important, and we will come back to that. But what we're talking about today is cholesterol and your cholesterol numbers and what you want these numbers to be. Now, if we do a lot of cholesterol tests, and the tests come back, and a lot of our patients get upset because their numbers are flagged as high or whatever, and they want them low. But what I'm going to tell you is going to contradict that. So your ideal cholesterol numbers should be between 220 and 240. Your HDL should be greater than 50, and your LDLs need to be in the 120s, 130s. When you look at a report, if your cholesterol is in 220, it's going to say it's high, and your primary is going to put you on a statin, and everybody's going to say you have to get those cholesterol levels. But what I want to do in this today is walk you through why that is not true. Now, there's a whole lot of it's very controversial, politically charged, a lot of stuff going on. So what I want to do is show you the data, and then you're going to have to make decisions on your own about, who's promoting what for what reason. So all I'm doing is showing you the numbers and the research that goes with those numbers. So if somebody's trying to put you on a statin, you need to start grilling them and asking them why, and are they familiar with the research that is out there. So, and this being one of the biggest studies, right? So 12.8 million adults. So it is not a small study, right? We base a lot of stuff when studies that are way fewer. I was just listening to a podcast where they were talking about aluminum safety in vaccines and how it's based off an N of 4, which is the number of subjects in the trial, and those subjects happen to be rabbits, and one of them was removed. So it was an N of 3. So the fact that we have 12.8 million adults is huge. This is a huge population study. And what it did was look at total cholesterol and all-cause mortality. And what they found was that there was a very significant U-shaped association with mortality with total cholesterol. Total cholesterol levels with the lowest mortality rate, and that's down here at the bottom in the third line from the bottom. Total cholesterol, TC, levels associated with lowest mortality were between 210 and 249. Except for men when they were 18 to 34, their best levels were 180 to 219, and women were slightly lower. But the inverse association for total cholesterol, less than 200, were stronger than the positive associations in the upper range. What does that mean? It means that if you have low cholesterol, you're much more likely to die than if you have high cholesterol. So let's say your cholesterol is like 300. Your risk of mortality is much lower than if your cholesterol level is like 120. So this is the graphs that they use for showing the total cholesterol and all-cause mortality. And this is done in men and women. And you can see that there's not that much difference between men and women. But what you do want to notice is one, on the right-hand side here, Look at these are the numbers down at the bottom. So this 100 to 300, this is your total cholesterol number, right? And all of us have been told like lower is better. But look at the mortality rate. And these are hazard ratios. So this isn't just like 1 or 2 times more. This is twofold. So your percentage is like 14% higher rates of mortality, all-cause mortality, when your cholesterol levels get down low. So I have one patient who was all excited because his total cholesterol was 118 and he's a male. Well, look at his mortality risk. It's the highest mortality rate in his age group for his gender is having a low cholesterol. And this was down from 300. He was better off at 300. His mortality rate was much lower when his cholesterol was 300. Now with the statin, he's down at 118, and his mortality risk has skyrocketed. So why would you add that risk to your probability, basically? Whereas here, one being no risk or equal risk, that it's not playing a contributing factor. So you can see it's right here on the line, and that's at like 220 to about 250. But again, having slightly elevated cholesterol doesn't offer that much of a difference. So if you were to err on the side of one or the other, I'd much rather have a cholesterol of 300 than a cholesterol of 100, which is extremely, extremely dangerous. So when you take age into factor, the green line is men, the red line is women, and they're pretty equal between 18 and 34, and really just kind of hovering down here. Mortality is pretty low in general in your 18 to 34 category. So the contribution of cholesterol might be causing other manifestations of disease and problems, but it's not necessarily killing people, except at these really, really low levels, right? So men, again, up here, imagine an 18-year-old with a really, really low cholesterol level. Their all-cause mortality is up significantly. And in the 35 to 44-year-old, it's exponentially higher. So a big deal. So again, it would be better to have a cholesterol of 300 because your risk profile is significantly less for all-cause mortality. And your ideal level right here at 200, between 200 or 220 to 240, that is the ideal total cholesterol levels. Now, when you look at, in the age range of 45 to 54, you start to see a convergence where you have men and women, particularly right here, they're the same. So it was previously men had higher risk of mortality related to total cholesterol, all-cause mortality, and now men and women are converging. So why is this? Why does this change? Why does it equal out in men and women? And this has to do with menopause. So when women go into menopause, they lose the protective effects of estrogen, and they start converging with men with the risk profile. So you can see here let's say they're 115 cholesterol and they're still under 2, and now they're above 2, right up there with the men in terms of mortality. And it's interestingly enough, this is the highest, this is the biggest killer of women is heart disease. So it's like 10 times more prevalent than breast cancer. You're much more likely to die of a cardiac condition with no warning whatsoever. It just happens. And this is why, because you lose your estrogen. And if your cholesterol is too low, this just exponentiates that mortality risk. So your ideal, again, total cholesterol would be between 220 and 240. And then you have in your 65 to 74 year range, again, your lowest mortality is down in the 200s. And here, basically you have people, and look here at the age of 75 to 99, this total cholesterol of around 300 is so much better than the risk factor of having low cholesterol. And again, the reason for this is because cholesterol is so important. It makes up the cell membrane. Every cell in your body is made up of that cholesterol phospholipid bilayer, right? and every compartment inside the cell is made up of cholesterol. So you need a lot of cholesterol. And like I said, the body doesn't depend on you. It makes its own cholesterol. The body makes cholesterol and the brain makes its own cholesterol because it cannot depend on you to supply it. This is another study, and this looks at all-cause mortality, cardiovascular mortality across 114 countries, I think it is. And you can see this very distinct and sharp U-turn. So this is another study showing the same exact thing. And look, these are your cholesterol numbers. This only goes down to 150, but look how high the all-cause mortality rate is at 150. This is going to keep going up. This is the inverse U. This doesn't go down. This keeps going up as the cholesterol level falls. And again, what we see right here between 220 and 240, and this one's a little bit tighter at 220, 230, this is the bottom of the curve. And even these curves are still in the 200 range. And the highest, this goes up to 250, is still way less of a risk than having low total cholesterol. So these are the studies that you want to present to your cardiologist or your primary who's saying that you need to go on a statin or you want low cholesterol levels. Fundamentally, there is a disconnect between cholesterol levels, mortality, and your risk. So why are we promoting low cholesterol, right? Because honestly, a low cholesterol is the very definition of cellular dysfunction. So if you have low cholesterol levels, you have membrane disruption problems of the cell, and that needs to be addressed. Now, in terms of LDLs, so again, even the guidelines, the diabetic guidelines, want you to have LDL levels less than 100. Well, when your LDL levels are less than 100, your mortality risk increases significantly. And one of the things that I want to point out here, these are numbers that you're not as familiar with because they're using a different range here. But this last one above 4, this is the highest level of LDLs. The hazard ratio of death here is way lower than the person that's on a statin, right? I mean, that's really concerning. It's very concerning that if you're on a statin, you're more likely to die than if your LDLs are at the highest level. So that's very concerning, and that is consistent in all age groups. Now, on the other end, we have HDLs, and HDLs also have a U curve. So, the body likes balance. It doesn't want things too low. It doesn't want it too high. It wants that Goldilocks range. And the Goldilocks range, particularly for men, is going to be between 50 to about 90. For women, it's less so of an issue. They have a much wider range. Men, when you get really high in HDL, the mortality rate shoots up. Whereas women, this is a little flatter, but, an HDL of 150, it's very rare that you see something like that, but it would be something to address. Ideally, you want to be in this range, which is somewhere between 50 and 90. And for men, it's about 50 to 80. That is the ideal area. And this is that bell curve, the distribution of what HDL is in men. And the sweet spot is right here for men. So the 20, this is about 50 to around 80-ish. That is your ideal scenario. And for women, the mortality rate is pretty flat. So, anything above 50 for women is ideal. It's less of an issue. So there's something with men in HDLs that needs to be explored further. Now, when you look at adjustments for age, for triglycerides and for other multifactorial, you find the same exact thing. This is HDL still. So HDLs are what we consider the good cholesterol, though there's no good bad cholesterol. It's all good. You need cholesterol. LDLs take the cholesterol. So cholesterol is not water soluble, so it can't dissolve in the bloodstream. It needs to be transported. So your liver makes cholesterol, and these proteins, the LDLs are proteins, they come pick up the cholesterol and they bring it to the cell so the cell can build the membrane. And what it doesn't use is export it through HDL, and HDL takes it and gives it back to the liver to recycle. And then you just go on, right? So if you have really, really low cholesterol, total cholesterol, then you're going to have low LDLs and low HDLs just by association, right? Because you don't need as many LDL proteins and HDL proteins to recycle that cholesterol. So again, this is just showing another representation of your ideal levels between about 50 to 80. But the other thing that's really, really interesting here is not just cardiovascular mortality, but the cancer mortality. And we're going to talk about this in other videos, but there is a biochemistry of cancer that is pretty much all related to cholesterol. So, and cholesterol regulation. There's a very, very significant and prominent prodromal syndrome of low cholesterol, low HDLs, and high cancer rates. And that is something that has been explored in studies. That this is just showing the elderlies, but and these are very reputable journals. These are old. I mean, this studies was done in 2010. There's studies that date back into the 80s. Like, we've known about this for decades. So why we keep pushing for statins is unclear, but high density lipid, lipoprotein cholesterol, and the risk of cancer. There's a significant inverse relationship between HDL. So when your HDLs are low, the incidence of cancer is high. And that's independent of whatever your LDLs are, whatever your age is, whatever your BMI is, if you have diabetes, what your gender is, whether you smoke or not. So low levels of HDL are associated with higher levels of cancer risk. And again, another study looking at that. So this study confirms that there was significant association between low levels of cholesterol and cancer mortality. And that is something that has been very extensively explored. The biochemistry of it is understood, and it is something that we will go through in another lecture. So again, another study, and again, these are reputable journals, Journal of the American College of Cardiology. I mean, this is what your cardiologist, your primary care, this is what they should be reading, and maybe take this article in and say, look, there's an inverse association between LDL and cancer. So why are you putting me on statins when lowering my LDLs less than 100 increases my risk for cancer? And those are the things, those are the questions you need to be asking. So ideal cholesterol biomarkers, and again, we'll go through the biochemistry of what a cancer prodrome looks like related to cholesterol and cholesterol regulation. But your ideal levels, regardless of what your LabCorp, your Quest says, regardless of what your cardiologist says or your primary care, your total cholesterol needs to be between 220 and 250. If it's less than 200, this is a mark of cellular dysfunction. So you're having problems with regulating cholesterol. You don't have enough cholesterol to build your membranes, your phospholipid bilayer. Your LDLs need to be greater than 130. If they're less than 90, you are very high risk for developing all different types of cancers. HDLs need to be greater than 50. That is also an issue if they're less than 50. And your HDLs are going to be less than 50 if your total cholesterol is low, because again, it's a part of the transport system. So cholesterol is carried out by LDLs and brought back by the HDL. So they're neither good nor bad. They are just proteins that are moving cholesterol around, and you need a higher level of cholesterol in order to build the cells. And then triglycerides, we'll have a separate discussion on triglycerides, but you want these between 60 and 90. If they're less than 60, this is a marker of basically malnutrition or starvation. Maybe you're doing too much time restricted eating or too much fasting or something. When it's over 100, it is a marker of also cellular dysfunction. You're looking at mitochondrial dysfunction or peroxisomal dysfunction in the body, and we'll go over that extensively in other lectures. So if you guys have questions, concerns, you want me to go over your cholesterol levels, or you want some access to the research studies, please let me know, and hit like, subscribe to the channel to learn more, and look forward to having you at the Philly Wellness Center at 1 8th and South. Thanks, guys.